Good afternoon. My name is Robert Beringer, and it's my pleasure to go over the use of restraint and seclusion within schools. Just a little bit of background. I'm the assistant principal at a private nonprofit school in South Dakota that utilizes restraint for some of the students in our population. There's just a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to quick turn off this webcam here. Before I get too far, it's really important, I think, that we just give credit to Jessica Butler. She and her then OTCOM just done a phenomenal job of collecting data information that is quite relevant to this presentation. And much of the research and the data that I'll share today has come from her and the work of her team. I've included her email address there, as well as a link at the end of this presentation that you can utilize to go and look at some of the work that she has completed. On the objective. So, what we're going to get out of this presentation is it's my hope that when you're done with this, you're going to have more of an understanding of what exactly restraint and seclusion is, and we'll go over a working definition of that here soon and understand why this is an issue. And I think it's going to become quite easy to see why exactly restraint and seclusion is an issue and something that we can't ignore. And then leading another thing is really improving our understanding of the precipitating factors that have led to this debate. I always often tell people when I talk about restraint and seclusion that just if you have time just to do a quick Google search, you're going to get a lot of different articles and a lot of different opinions about whether or not restraint and seclusion should be utilized. And it's quite clear at that point that it is a very sensitive and hot topic issue. And in many states, such as South Dakota, it is going to become more and more so as a current work group that has just started begins to meet and hopefully irons out some legislation within South Dakota by December. And then again, what schools can do moving forward. So you're going to lead with some information, and my hope is not really to scare anybody, but to really understand what restraint and seclusion is all about, when maybe it can or can't be used, and what kind of safeguards and guidelines we can be putting into practice, and being able to take that to your local legislative session or to your fellow constituents or your school board or your teachers, just making sure that we're aware of this and what we can be doing as a team to move forward. The problem, it's really, the problem really lies at at the unnecessary use of restraint and seclusion. We'll talk really about, what that means and what should be in place prior to ever using restraint and seclusion. This really focuses on any kind of positive behavioral supports. But to be quite honest with you, this issue would not be as significant as it is if there was not a lack of federal support. Um, right now, there is no federal legislation that's really outlining or guiding the states through from starting at that federal standpoint. Back in 1998, the Hartford Courant published quite a startling expose on the use of restraint and seclusion, and a number of students who were passing away from that. And it was really that catapulted a 2009 letter from Congressman George Miller, who was at that point the chair of the Education and Labor Committee, as well as Congressman Kathy Rogers, introducing the first national bill to ever really look at restraint and seclusion. That bill passed quite easily within the House, but did not pass the Senate. And ever since 2009, we've seen a number of variations of that law go through the House, but not pass the Senate. And then in 2009, that same year, which led to a lot of the momentum was when there were two parents who were asked to testify in front of the House and Senate about what exactly restraint and seclusion has done to their family, and it was actually two parents who lost their child or their children from being restrained and secluded from the classroom. This state in action, there are some states that are doing a wonderful job, and we'll go over a map of a lot of those states here, but there are also a significant number of states who continue to fall well short, and unfortunately South Dakota is one of those. That being said, it's really important that while state legislation really can help out. It really should be taking place at a national level, and it's no substitute for a lack of federal support. But there are a number of states who are doing some really good things, which is great to see, and again, very clear to see within Miss Butler's research. Right now, there's currently an absence of a national database. So really, what that means is there's no current way to track the total use of restraint seclusion, and then just the discrepancies in criteria of exactly what that's looking like, and what needs to be reported, and what is. So a working definition. Ultimately, seclusion is when students do not have the choice and they're put in an area. Sometimes it could be a small room where they can't get out, but they're confined at that point. And then a restraint could be anything that restricts a student's movement. This could be any kind of physical restraint and or a mechanical restraint, but something that is limiting the student's natural ability to move would constitute as a restraint. It's really interesting, when you look at the history of special education, and really since 1979 when we saw EHA, and then years later we saw IDEA go through, which is really the groundwork, and created just an awesome foundation. And it's important to note that our country has come so far with the rights of students with disabilities, but it's quite evident that the use of restraint has been around just as long as special education has. So for over the last 40 years, we know this has been an issue, but it hasn't been until recently where a number of injuries and deaths have been brought to light. You just think about, like, in 2015, for instance, the Connecticut office who currently just does a wonderful job of tracking that within their state, identified 13 injuries from restraint seclusion within their state, and 24 of those were labeled as serious injuries. And these are states. This is the state who has really their ducks in a row and knows exactly what they're doing. And then we're seeing more and more legislative action within states specifically. We haven't seen a lot of play within the national government as of lately. So here we have a little map, and this is what I was referring to. So I'll give you a second to scan and look for your state. My state is white, right in the middle, South Dakota. And this one is right here, states who have meaningful protections by law. And really meaningful, I guess an understanding of that, it's any, maybe like something that's a state that has strong data collection provisions. They're monitoring schools for compliance within the law. They're publishing and monitoring those reports. They're requiring parental notification, which we'll touch on in just a few minutes here. They're banning restraints that interferes with breathing, and they're limited to only those times when it's absolutely needed, such as an emergency. So right now, there are currently 22 states that have meaningful protections set in place. Now there are 34 states who have had some meaningful protections. So some of those things that list that we just went through, there are some states who have that. There are currently 9 states right now with non-binding guidances. So it's not legislation, but it's really just maybe suggestions that they're really putting out there. And then legal protection from one of the two. So there's some laws in place, but they only protect from one or the other. So either restraint or seclusion, not both. And then there are currently 5 states who lack legislation or policies. And as of this point, in June of 2015, South Dakota remains one of those 5 states. So the precipitating factors, just really looking at it, the restrictions on the use of restraint and seclusion, we're just, it's so important when we really look at that and try to get our heads wrapped around when they would be used and why they would be used, and what needs to be done before that. And really my opinion that these students should be on behavioral intervention plans. They should have an FBA, and we need to make sure that that it's only used in the most desperate of situations where a student is absolutely in danger of hurting themselves or maybe one of their peers. We're really called to ban and or limit the use of restraints and seclusion. More specifically, when we look at really those dangerous types, for instance, prone restraints, where a student is laid on their stomach, that could disrupt breathing, just absolutely would need to go, and really making sure that we're looking quite with specificity at the safeguards that are put in place in regards to utilizing restraint and seclusion, and then just a number of different procedural safeguards, like what kind of training is available to staff. Are they trained in conflict resolution? Are they trained in positive behavioral supports? Are they trained in the use of the specific adopted restraint system within that school? Right now, parent notification, which is another big thing, and I'll give you a second to scan for your state. Now, most states have done a very good job of identifying that. You'll see there are quite a few different states right here who have taken steps that require the school to contact the parent within 1 day. Unfortunately, with a lot of the injuries and deaths we talked about earlier, parents were never informed. They found out an accident, or they did not know that this was an issue until they found bruises on their child. So what needs to happen when we look at this? There's just such a need for data collection, for that clear, consistent data collection that's made available. It, as of right now, there's really just isn't anything out there, and those data reporting procedures can really come from a variety of different areas. It could come from the state, and there are a number of states who have some really good policies in place that are requiring states to report. And then there are also many states who are taking care of that at the local education uh, tier of that. Proper training for school personnel is huge. If restraint is going to be utilized, staff should have significant amount of training. I just think about our school right now. Staff for initially are required a total of 40 hours of training, and they have to be trained to competency. They also have to take a variety of tests as well as demonstrate those, and then they have to be certified in the specifics of utilizing that restraint, and then it's 8 hours every year after that to remain um, licensed to be able to utilize that. Having clear definitions of problem behavior, that it seems so elementary, but really understanding what exactly the problem is, and also knowing that there is no data that supports that the use of restraint and or seclusion decreases problematic behavior. It is not an intervention. It is a last case resort to keep a student safe. And then really just focusing on any kind of support, any kind of positive behavioral support that could be put into place that would help decrease the likelihood of a student needing to be restrained. Here are some resources right here. I apologize. If you have any questions, there's like I said, there's the OTCOM, how safe is the schoolhouse right here. You should be able to see that right there. This PDF, sorry, not really good right there. But anyway, that's where Ms. Butler's work can be found right there. If you have any questions, I would say utilize this as a resource. Thank you for your time, and I hope you feel more empowered and informed as it relates to the topic of restraint and seclusion.